the second Psycho film leaving things fairly open-ended. It could have gone either way, and probably could have ended it there with some sense of finality. And the question begged by Psycho 3 is whether or not this movie made it worth it for another entry in the series, telling the story of Norman Bates and his motel. I would say for the most part, it is worth it. Psycho 3 has much to like about it, though I do think it is definitely a step down in quality from the last one. I don't think it's quite as strong. It doesn't have a strong enough style to it that makes it stand out too uniquely. There's definitely some visual nods to the original film, and maybe there's not much of a voice of its own. This one, for a good deal of the time, feels a lot more slashery, if that's the right phrase to use, which is something I feel the last movie tried so hard to sway away from. There are some murder scenes that are pretty ghastly, but not especially memorable. There's explicit nudity for its own sake. There's a good deal of goofy stuff, like for instance, there's that scene where the oblivious sheriff, Hugh Gillen reprising his role, he's chomping on some ice cubes from the ice box while having a conversation with Norman, not even noticing the dead body stuffed inside, right in front of him. So it can get pretty silly. And I don't know, I expected a little bit more after such a good sequel with the second one. Even the acting in this one isn't quite as good. Anthony Perkins, who directed the film, he just seems a little bit too jumpy in the role of Norman Bates, which I found unusual. Also, for what it's worth, and I know it's probably an acquired taste, but I didn't really care for the music in the movie either. Jerry Goldsmith's score for Psycho 2 was definitely a step down from Bernard Herrmann, naturally, but it stood on its own, and it was worthy enough. But the score for Psycho 3, provided by Carter Burrell, who has some great work under his belt, is many steps down. And I guess the best way to put it is that it's painfully 80s, so if that's your thing, you might get a kick out of it. But, okay. I don't want to spend too much time on the negative, because there's plenty to like about the movie. Despite not being quite as good as he was in the previous two, Anthony Perkins still, he gives a good turn as Norman Bates. He's known for the role for years. He's celebrated just as much as any of his fans would. And it fits him like a glove. He knows what makes Norman Bates work, and he brings it to this movie, in front and behind the camera. There's fun to be had with the material if you accept it for what it is. For one thing, it's become apparent with this entry, now more than ever, that the Bates Motel, it attracts troubled individuals like it has its own gravitational pull. And some interesting characters cross path with Norman, including a disgraced nun, a would-be rocker drifter, and too aggressive for her own good investigative journalists. If it's not as psychologically enticing as the last film, then it at least makes up for it in its own colorful array of characters that add to the conflict. The main characters here, they're also different in their personalities and also different in their own personal agendas. That when they all cross paths, it creates an ominous and tangled web that is very much entertaining and very thrilling to witness being woven. Jeff Fahey, in one of his earlier roles, is particularly really good. He's a lot of fun, has a lot of energy in playing Dwayne, my friends call me Duke, taking up a job at the Bates Motel, in a strange kind of way. He almost becomes sort of like a protege to Norman, and if he sees something about him that he can't quite put his finger on, it's something that kind of draws the two together. But that's just the thing. Duke definitely is crazy in his own right, but just in a different kind of way, a way that Norman Bates can't really understand, given his demeanor. So it reaches a point where they do end up head-to-head against each other, and I thought that was nicely done. Like with Psycho 2, there's also a young female character who comes to sympathize with Norman and becomes a figure of redemption for him. Being the Freudian nightmare that he is, he's always seemingly on alert for a female figure to save him from himself and take care of him and take the place of his mother, if only his mother would let that happen. This character is Maureen, played by Diana Scarwood. as a nun who's run away from her convent after a terrible incident involving her loss of faith and an accidental murder. I don't think she's quite as good as Meg Tilly from Psycho 2. Her character doesn't leave as much of a lasting impression, but she's serviceable. It's apparent very early on to Norman and to us as the audience, of course, that she bears a striking resemblance to Marion Crane. They're not exactly subtle about it at all, but it works. Norman realizes that if he's able to protect her, and if she's able to protect him, then maybe in some way he can make up for the past and put it behind him once and for all. But he knows that at any moment Mother could appear and put an end to that. With Maureen as this shamed nun, this fallen angel, as it were, Psycho 3 welcomes in some religious themes to the movie. Religion and sin and punishment, they're all undercurrents of a good many horror films. One thing to keep in mind is that this movie, and Psycho 2 for that matter, is that it came out during the height of popularity of the Friday the 13th series, lots of slashers like that, and it wouldn't be too hard to argue that this is still a more mature movie than any of the Friday the 13ths, and there must have been at least some kind of pressure to match the shock value and the bloodlust provided by that series. And in not a really direct way, you could see how they share common ground. Jason Voorhees, the masked killer, murders teens who have premarital sex because he knows Mother wouldn't approve. Norman, in his split personality, bears the burden of being on both sides of that equation. He's shamed by his own sexual desires and kills because of it, and can never find the saving grace that he so desperately seeks. So if the Friday the 13th slashers are about this puritanical kind of punishment, then so are the Psycho films, except that there's a deranged cruelty and dangling salvation right in front of Bates, but it's never within his reach, because he's both the punisher and the victim. By the end of it all, Norman is once again caught, brought back into custody, and he flashes that trademark grin, like in the ending of the first movie. But now that we know the character a little better after these two sequels, we can come to understand it's more of a smile of relief this time, since he knows there's really no place in the world for him. I rate Psycho 3 3 stars out of 4. It's flawed, but take it for face value, and it works on its own terms, and still a superior slasher film. So thank you for watching my review of Psycho 3. I like this one. If you like it too, comment below. If you think this review is wrong, please comment as well. Comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter at HiThisIsDerek, and Tumblr, derek237.tumblr.com. More on the way soon. Thank you very much for watching.